Hello everybody, I'm Mohammad Fotouhi and my presentation is about damage characterization of laminated composite materials using acoustic emission. I'm visiting researcher at University of Bristol and we're trying to tell some works that I did in my PhD work about characterization of laminated defects in laminated composite materials. As many of you know, the composite materials are very useful, and they are most parts of structure of aircraft nowadays are using this kind of materials. They are light and they have many benefits. Besides, they have some problems. Most of them is related to susceptibility to delamination. They are very sensitive to damage mechanisms because of their complex structures, and we want to detect and determine this kind of damage using a novel technique which is called acoustic emission. And acoustic emission is a technique which is passive. It means that we just put our sensors on the surface of the specimens, and after, when we have damage mechanism inside the material, we can catch the sounds and the waves producing by damage mechanisms inside the material. As you see from the picture, we have a sensor. We are catching the waveforms, and later we are analyzing using a special software. Each waveform has its own parameters. As you see, there are many parameters like amplitude, rise time, energy, and other parameters. And this method has some benefits, but besides, we have a problem in using this method about noise reduction and the analysis of data, which are very important to have good result, to have good analysis about our structure and our damage mechanisms. We tried to separate different kind of damage mechanisms using different techniques with acoustic emission signals. A simple method that we used was separation of damage mechanisms using their own specific characteristics in the case of acoustic emission parameters. For example, we found that matrix cracking, which is one of the damage mechanisms, produce lower amplitude and energy, and delamination and debonding has the medium value of amplitude and energy, whereas fiber breakage produce the maximum amplitude and energy in most laminated composite materials. Then we use this simple classification, and as you see from the pictures, we analyzed we separated the signals based on this criteria. And you see there's a black line which is related to load, and we have time here, and on the other axis it's AE amplitude, and we could separate them using this criteria. This is a simple way that we used, and I want to explain some more developed method that we use to characterize these damage mechanisms. We used also some multivariable analysis of AE parameters like fuzzy Siemens clustering, genetic algorithm, and we used most of these techniques using PCA, principal component analysis. PCA is a method that helps us to find the most effective parameters in acoustic emission. As I mentioned before, each signals of AE has its own AE parameters like amplitude, frequency, energy, and with using PCA we can determine which parameters is the best parameter for characterization of these damage mechanisms. We used PCA first and then applied clustering, different type of clustering like fuzzy Siemens clustering, genetic, to separate classes. And as you see from picture, there are 3 different colors, each color related to different type of damage mechanism. And we found that we have very good separation in PCA1 and PCA2. This PCA1 and PCA2 was determined based on PCA principal component analysis. And we found that each type of material, each type of laminates has its own damage mechanism. I mean, the percentage of damage mechanism in these three classes are different. Each kind shows different type of damages. We tried to classify the obtained signals based on the frequency content, and we found three different frequency content on them. The lower frequency is related to matrix cracking, the middle one related to debonding and delamination, and the higher one is related to fiber breakage. And we said that it's okay, and we can determine the type of damage mechanisms using analysis of AE signals. And as you see here, and as I told before, each type of damage mechanisms has its own AE features, which makes possible for us to determine these damage mechanisms. Even we can determine order of damage mechanisms by putting these clusters in load displacement diagram, as you see from the pictures. On the left, it should be on the right, and on the bottom, and there is three different colors, which are blue, green, and red. Blue is related to matrix cracking, which starts sooner, and it means that our first failure mechanisms in this case was matrix cracking. Later, we have fiber breakage and debonding, which happening together. But the number and the percentage of these damages are also different. And in this way, and with this method, we can characterize them. Another benefit of using acoustic emission is that we can determine the critical load that makes initiation of propagation in delamination or any other type of cracks. And the first significant signals of acoustic emission can be used to determine the initiation of delamination or any other type of loading. Also, we used centrifugal function, which is the combination of acoustic emission and mechanical energy. And we found quite interesting result by this way. We used ln of ES per EA, which is ES mechanical energy or restraint energy, and EA is acoustic emission energy. And we determined different functions in this. We determined different trends in this function, and we found that we have different strain storing energy phases, which are shown in the picture. And you can see that in different phases of load, we have different behaviors in centrifugal function diagram. And also, we used acoustic emission to determine critical strain energy, and we used the criteria integral of centrifugal function and G1, which is G1 cumulative, which is critical strain energy release rate for mode 1, and we did the same for mode 2 and mixed mode. And we found that we have a transition points, and we can analyze and we can determine the critical strain energy release rate using centrifugal function. We compared the result with ASTM, and we found very interesting result. And even our deviation from average was less than the standard methods. Another applicable of acoustic emission that we did was about following the fatigue crack growth. We followed the fatigue crack growth using just acoustic emission, and we found that we can use acoustic emission to follow and to measure the lengths of cracks in fatigue and even in static tests. And this is very simple and useful method that we can use one sensor that determines the length of cracks. And these are some of our published papers in this field that we did with our college, and these are mostly related to my PhD thesis. My name is Mohammad again, and this is my contact. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Thank you.